Hello everyone and welcome to the Unanswered Questions True Crime Podcast.
I have spent hours and hours investigating this.
He basically told her that people have been killed. Journalists, independent investigators, people like that disappeared. It frightened her to the bone.
There's more to the story than meets the eye.
There were rumors of torture and homicide and sexual abuse, all sorts of egregious, horrendous crimes.
He was polygraphed 3 times. Each of those 3 showed evasions.
His resumes were a skeleton of truth.
He was mad at the world, and particularly mad at the government.
The study that he commissioned described a fictional terrorist attack.
If people have died over this, means you're getting close to the truth.
You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, what the fuck?
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my new podcast, Unanswered Questions, where every week we'll endeavour to discuss a mysterious unsolved case that has many lingering unanswered questions. So I hope you enjoy, and as always, leave me some feedback on what you think about the show and rate it as well. Now on to the show. This week we'll be talking about the disappearance of Daniel Moses.
They burned my granddaddy's house to the ground. My mother lived there 65 years and no one ever bothered her. Whoever hurt Daniel, they came to that little town to hurt him. It was someone who knew him and knew him well.
And Daniel Moses was 59 years old at the time of his disappearance in June 2011. His sister Sheila describes him as being a kind and gentle soul who adored his large family containing 10 other siblings and, at the time, a loving mother who lived next door.
Daniel is my oldest brother, and he was so wonderful, and he loved his little sisters and brothers. He was just this kind, gentle soul. So my family, my grandfather, my grandmother, the Moses family, we are from Northampton County, North Carolina. Rural North Carolina. They have 2 stoplights and 1 high school in the entire county. We live in a little area called Rehoboth. And on Rehoboth Road, I was born on Rehoboth Road, the house that my grandfather, Braxton Jones, purchased in 1956 for $3,000. That's my granddaddy's land.
Daniel was the eldest of his siblings who, at the age of 17, after growing up in the rural county of Rehoboth, North Carolina, decided to make a move up north to New Jersey. He had hoped to find more prosperous opportunities compared to his hometown. He was successful and he began working as a long-haul truck driver. His fortunes grew further when he got married and promptly started a family.
She had a home about 20 minutes from us and another home in Raleigh. On the weekends, she came and spent the weekends with Daniel.
Sheila, who was only young when Daniel left, came to visit her big brother when she was old enough, and the pair enjoyed trips to the cinema and concerts.
There's a 10-year age difference between my oldest brother Daniel and myself. So I'm a 6-year-old little girl when he leaves home, like many African American men and women did in the 50s and 60s. And he was this beautiful black man in the 60s, you know, with the afro and the James Brown pants and hope. And when we were old enough to go to New Jersey, he would help us find summer jobs. He took me to New York, see my first movie. He took me to my first Chinese restaurant. He took me to my first concert. Most of the things that happened first in my life, my brother made those things happen because he loved us and we loved him.
Life for Daniel in New Jersey was, by all accounts, good. However, Daniel's fortunes changed when he experienced a serious back injury in 1998. His ability to work ended, as did his marriage. He subsequently moved back to Rehoboth, purchasing his grandfather's old home next to his mother's residence. I do apologise if I do get that name Rehoboth wrong. I am not very good at pronunciation of certain names and things. I know it's been brought up in the comments of some videos, so I apologise if I get the names of things wrong. If if I mispronounced things wrong. I think it was in the Profumo affair. There was a person who commented that I got the name wrong throughout the entire podcast, so I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, if I get these names of places, names of people, and names of other things wrong. I do apologize. I am absolutely terrible at pronunciation of names. I do my best. Thank you for your understanding. There he started an on and off again relationship with a woman whose name I could not determine and whose role will become much clearer later on. He spent his weeks fishing, bike riding and learning karate. He also made exceptional barbecue sauce that he sold to nearby family and friends, earning him the nickname of the Barbecue Man.
He had a lot of hobbies. Loved to fish, loved to ride his bike, loved to work out. He started taking karate and he loved it. He was good. And he could really, really, really cook. He cooked a mean barbecue. He had this grill that he made out of cement. And that's where he made the barbecue. At one point, he was making it every week. So he would go around in the community and sell his barbecue. And they called him the Barbecue Man. That's the last thing my brother gave me. Was a container of barbecue. That's the last thing he gave me. Was Mother's Day weekend of 2011 was barbecue. Yeah.
Then, in June 2011, Daniel sold his last batch of barbecue sauce and disappeared without a trace.
It was June 16th, 2011, when the fire was discovered by his brother and another farmer in the area. Once the fire was discovered, they were under the assumption that he was inside the house. They tried to go in the house. Of course, the fire and smoke was too great for them to get in there, so they backed out.
Now we get into what happened to him. On Thursday, the 16th of June 2011, Sheila, Daniel's sister, was at work when she got a phone call from one of her brothers telling her that Daniel's house was on fire and that her brother couldn't be located.
I was at a client's office. My phone rang, and it's my brother, and he's in a total panic. I'm trying to call Daniel, but the number's not working. And he said, Grandma's house is on fire and we can't find Daniel. So I hang up, but let me tell you, when I hung up, I knew something had happened to him. Everything inside of me said I saw death. Everything.
Fearing the worst, they rushed to the scene of the blaze. Firefighters were already on site, but it would take several hours to extinguish the flames. All the while, the family assumed Daniel was inside and had perished. Once the fire was out, investigators entered the property and sifted through the debris. The fire damage was extensive, but not enough to preclude thorough examination.
Our arson agent went to the scene and did his investigation. He was able to determine that the origin of cause was near a front window where an air conditioning unit was. But he couldn't determine the cause because he could not rule out electrical as a possible starting of the fire. Obviously, they searched the house for any human remains in the house. Like I said, it was a small house, so the search was not that extensive. And the fire damage was significant, but it wasn't that significant that you could not search the house for human remains. They did not find any.
The source of the blaze was determined to have originated near a front window adjacent to an air conditioning unit. The cause, however, was less clear. Electrical malfunction may have been to blame, but this could not be determined, and my understanding is it was never actually determined what the cause of the fire was. Critically, however, no human remains or blood droplets were found on the property. Daniel had not been inside when the fire started, so where was he? Well, the family were obviously relieved to learn their brother had not died in the fire, but another mystery presented itself. Daniel's family came together the day after the fire to discuss when it was that any of them had actually last seen or spoken to him. The following series of events is what the family unearthed during their discussions. It turned out that the last contact they had made with Daniel had been 5 days prior on Saturday, 11th of June, 2011. On that day, Daniel's nephew Andre paid Daniel a visit at his home and purchased some barbecue sauce from him. This, the family determined, was the last time any of them had contact with Daniel before the fire. 2 days later, on Monday the 13th of June, Daniel's brother Johnny made a visit to the property. He reported that Daniel's car and truck were present in the front yard, his dog was inside the house growling at him, and the air conditioning unit was operating. He knocked on the door but received no response. Assuming Daniel was chilling inside, Johnny left the home.
One of my brothers go and knock on Daniel's door. His car's in the yard, his air is on, and his truck is in the yard. He had a really mean dog. The dog is not barking. The dog is growling at my brother. My brother was like, he's in there. I guess he thought he was just chilling out. So my brother left. That's Monday. Tuesday, my mother says to my sister, I haven't heard from Daniel. I'm going to call him in the morning. She calls him and he didn't answer.
Sheila, in later reports, believes that Daniel's girlfriend had been residing at the property over the weekend and had left the morning of Monday the 13th of June. His girlfriend claimed to have done just this, but the accuracy of this is unknown, as is whether Daniel himself was actually in the home when Johnny made his visit. We'll come back to his girlfriend in a minute, as she's a very interesting part of this case. On Tuesday the 14th of June, Daniel's mother, who was away from the area that same week, contacted Sheila and said that she had not heard from Daniel for a few days and that he hadn't answered her phone calls. She decided to try again on the Wednesday. This attempt was also not reciprocated. His mother would try yet again the morning of Thursday the 16th, again to no avail. Worried, she contacted Daniel's girlfriend to inquire about his whereabouts. She received some very strange information in return. Daniel's girlfriend, as I understand it, informed his mother that Daniel had been stressed and tired and that he had gone on vacation, but that he is okay, and that was repeated verbatim. His mother immediately disbelieved this statement, claiming that there was no way that Daniel would go away without informing her or his other siblings. After the fire, Sheila also contacted his girlfriend to ask why, if Daniel had gone on holiday, his vehicles were still on the property and why his bank account showed no activity. By this time, the family had hired somebody to check Daniel's financial activities. His girlfriend then claimed that Daniel was not using his account, he was using a Shell credit card. The family obviously did not believe that there was any chance that Daniel had done any such thing, and thus the mystery of Daniel's disappearance continued.
Now her mother instincts are kicking in. When he didn't answer, my mother said, wait a minute. She calls the girlfriend and says, listen, I haven't talked to Daniel. She answers and says, Daniel is on vacation. Her exact words, Daniel was stressed. Daniel needed a break. He said he was going on vacation and he left. He's okay. My mother said, no, he's not. My children don't go on vacation and don't tell me. Now, at that time, her oldest child was 60. We don't go on vacation and don't tell our mother. So I called the girlfriend. I said, listen, his car and truck are both in the yard. Where did Daniel go on vacation? How is he traveling? He's not using his ATM card, because by then we had gotten someone to look at his records at the bank and he was not using his ATM card. She said he's using his Shell card. I called my sister. I said, we have a problem. Daniel does not have a Shell credit card. Period.
2 days after the fire, Daniel's family made extensive efforts to locate their sibling. They put flyers up around the town and made calls to anyone who might have seen him. No new leads, however, were generated. Then, 6 days later, on Wednesday the 22nd of June, they officially reported his disappearance to the police. Official investigations were fruitless and Daniel remained missing. His case was eventually put on the back burner until new information was received. 6 months later, in the winter of 2012, a dissatisfied Sheila wrote a letter to the governor of the area in an attempt to reinvigorate the investigation that she had considered sluggish and inadequate. It worked.
If I lose my keys in my house, there is only one way I will find my keys. I will have to look for my keys. They have not looked for Daniel Moses. If I don't call them, they don't call me. If I don't raise hell, there is no hell. And I'm going to beat this bone until it breaks. And I got tired begging because I don't do well with that. So I wrote the governor and told him what was going on.
The case was reopened, this time led by Special Agent Walter Brown. However, the end result was the same. Daniel Moses remains missing to this day. His fate remains uncertain. Now we get into the police investigations and the very mysterious letter in the glove box of his car. Once Daniel's family reported his disappearance, the police began their investigations. Approximately 100 people were gathered and deployed in what is termed a ground search of the area surrounding Daniel's home. They were uniformly lined up and meticulously searched segments of the area at a time, including bodies of water nearby. Cadaver dogs were also used during the ground search, and despite the methods, however, Daniel was not located. Unfortunately, there are issues with the search that have been raised. Daniel's home was located in an extremely rural area surrounded by huge woodland areas that are entirely unpopulated by people. If somebody had wanted to hide a body, it would have been prime real estate in which to do so. Could Daniel's body actually be there somewhere that had not been originally searched? Very well could be, but we'll never know for sure.
90% of the time, or even greater than that really, the person is gone and they're found. They're gone for a couple of days, they're found in a couple of weeks. So it was several days in before the sheriff's department started investigating it. And it got more and more obvious that something was amiss, that something wasn't right. The sheriff's department conducted what we would describe as a ground search, where they had maybe 100 or so individuals help search the woods and farmland around his house. They did use cadaver dogs. They did search some bodies of water. The problem is there's vast, and I would describe it as very vast amount of land surrounding his house that if you wanted to put somebody there, that's where you would want to pick, because it's a lot of land, a lot of real estate, a lot of woods, a lot of farmland, and not many people.
The initial police investigation led to no leads regarding Daniel's whereabouts, but the family were not satisfied with the matter, claiming the police were disinterested and slow to respond. After sheriffs failed to conduct a search of Daniel's car and truck, the family took the matter into their own hands. They found their way into Daniel's car, and inside the glove box was a very mysterious letter. It had no stamp and had not yet been mailed, indicating that it may have been directly left inside the car. The letter was addressed to Daniel, telling him that his girlfriend was having an affair, spending the week with another man in the nearby town of Riley where she worked, then returning to Daniel at the weekend. The letter went on to tell Daniel that he should check out his girlfriend and the other man she was reportedly seeing. Could it be that Daniel acted on this information inside this letter, leading him to a confrontation that ended badly? Again, it's another question we just can't answer.
The Northampton County Sheriff's Department did not search Daniel's car nor truck. My brother came home and searched the car and popped the trunk. Daniel could have been dead in that trunk, and we would have been the ones to find him. Thank God my brother was not in that trunk, because it would have killed my mother. But my brother found a letter in that car that was addressed to Daniel, but it was not mailed. It did not have a stamp. So someone he knew put it in his car. So the letter tells Daniel is true about his girlfriend, about that she was living in Raleigh during the week dating this other married man and come home to him on the weekends. Whoever wrote this letter, they're telling Daniel to check into her and this man.
It's fairly evident that she has had a long-term relationship with another individual, and that's more or less ongoing. We all kind of thought maybe someone just got jealous, that is a possibility. So we can't dismiss that.
6 months later, when Special Agent Walter Brown was assigned to the investigation, he began moving through the case with fresh eyes and purpose. He began by interviewing Daniel's family and friends, and absent of any enemies and the implausibility that he might simply disappear on his own, he saw signs that foul play may have been involved. He also attempted to question Daniel's girlfriend. She declined the invitation and directed him towards her lawyer, raising his suspicions. Brown was also curious about the behavior of Daniel's dog around the time of the fire. You see, the dog was not friendly to anybody outside of a small circle of people consisting of Daniel, his mother, and his girlfriend. Crucially, it would rarely leave Daniel's side. Now, when the house caught fire, it was nowhere to be seen, yet a day later on Friday the 17th of June, it returned to his mother's house next door. After chewing its way through a screened-in porch, it lay on the spot crying. Now, Brown questioned whether the dog had been at the house when the fire started and had run away in fear, or whether it may have been with Daniel somewhere else when something untoward may have happened.
His dog was not a friendly dog. Most people could not come up to the house without Daniel being present to be able to restrain the dog. The dog was not friendly to other people. It was friendly to a few people, but not many.
That dog barked at everyone except my mother, Daniel, and the girlfriend. So this is crazy. The day of the fire, the dog was not there, but he came back the next day. My mother's porch is like a screened-in porch. The dog has chewed the screen and he's on the porch like crying. He came back. The dog loved Daniel.
So the question in my mind is, did the fire scare the dog away? But you would think if the fire was sufficient to scare the dog away, he would still be, within eyesight, but just away from the house. Or was the dog with Daniel and something happened to Daniel away from the house? And the fire is not necessarily related to the investigation.
Brown also examined Daniel's phone activity. He made regular phone calls each day to the same people consistently and ordinarily. However, 2 weeks before he disappeared, Daniel strangely changed his phone number. He purchased a burner phone from Walmart where his girlfriend also worked. Was this a coincidence or a signifier of something else that had been going on in Daniel's life?
His phone records do not indicate somebody that used a phone a lot. He spoke to a few people regularly, but only a couple of calls a day. And he communicated with the same individuals. It was pretty consistent. His cell phone usage was the same. But we found out 2 weeks before he went missing that he changed his phone number.
This is so unlike Daniel. He had a cell phone that he had for years. Out of the blue, he all of a sudden changed his number. He gets a Walmart burner phone, and it's his girlfriend who worked at Walmart. That was so unlike him. So I do feel like something was going on related to that girlfriend.
The person that Daniel, the family, and Walter Brown most suspect of at least having more information about Daniel's disappearance is his girlfriend, which I also believe. At the time of the house fire, she claimed to have been in Riley. She also stated that the last time she had seen Daniel was on Monday morning before she left his house and returned to Riley. Her story about Daniel's vacation also has considerable issues. It's as unlikely that Daniel headed off on vacation without money, transport, and without telling any of his family where he was going and when he would be back. If the story were true, it would also mean he left his beloved dog alone with nobody to take care of it, yet this is the story that she has repeatedly put forward when asked. Moreover, she has continuously rejected opportunities and invitations to answer questions by officers who were initially assigned to the case and since.
It's concerning to me that she hasn't cooperated to the extent that I would expect a girlfriend who is sincerely concerned about her boyfriend's disappearance. She hasn't been willing to talk with law enforcement, or at least with the SBI, since that initial interview. Dozens of times we've reached out to her to speak to her, and she's just rejected those opportunities.
When the family contacted her to ask where he was, she did not make any subsequent attempts to contact Daniel herself to tell him that his family were concerned. They'd been together at this point for 10 years, making her behaviour odd and errant.
On Thursday, when my mother called her, "You've been dating this man 10 years. She didn't pick up the phone and call Daniel to say, "Hey, where are you? Your mother is looking for you." How do you date a man for 10 years and he goes missing and you don't come to the fire? How do you date someone for 10 years and they go missing and we've never heard from her again? And this is when I knew she knows something. She knows what happened to him.
Agent Brown and reportedly others on the case believe that Daniel's girlfriend may very well have been in another relationship with a man, and that this, via some mechanism, led to somebody getting jealous and resulting in Daniel's disappearance. The veracity of this, however, cannot be ascertained, nor can it be refuted. Now we get into theories about Daniel's disappearance. The most obvious and prominent theory about what happened to Daniel revolves around the possibility of foul play. Since his disappearance, Daniel has completely gone off the radar. His bank accounts have never been touched. Investigators kept an eye on disability checks that continued to occur in his account, but they were never withdrawn. His vehicles were left behind at the home, as was his dog. If Daniel was still alive somewhere else, he would have had to have undergone a complete change of identity, given the information about his personality and his attachment to his family. This does not seem likely.
Oftentimes, law enforcement, they get in that perception that he's tired of being around the daily grind that he has and he wants to go somewhere else. But with my agency, since all we do is the worst case scenarios, naturally, I assume that the worst case has happened and we're going to investigate the case as if there was a homicide, and until we're proven otherwise. Daniel was a healthy, athletic man, accomplished martial arts. He was a kind individual, but he didn't seek trouble. But he was the type that would take care of business if he had to, and we don't think that he was the type of individual to get up and leave and not have any communication with his family at all. Now, he has the disability check coming into his bank account every month, and it is still coming into his bank account every month. And it is there, and we monitor it to see if there's any withdrawals. So that, to me, is a huge indicator. No one just gets up and leaves their money unless they've completely lost their mind and they don't know who they are. So that would certainly lead to the belief that foul play is the cause of his disappearance.
The addition of the letter inside the car and his girlfriend's odd behaviour led to a question of whether she may have had knowledge of or participation in his disappearance, which I definitely believe she did. However, officially that remains unknown, and the likely outcome sadly comes back to the possibility that Daniel met an untimely end on or around the time he disappeared. But there are issues with this theory. Sheila has described her brother as being a large man, tall in stature and broad in appearance. He was also proficient in martial arts and hunting, and he had a home full of guns. An assailant would have had a hard time ambushing him at home and living to tell the tale. So, if somebody had intended to do him harm, they either would have had to have found a way to catch him unaware, or he knew his attacker well enough to drop his guard. Could this have been the case? Well, of course, there is also the possibility that Daniel did go on holiday like his girlfriend suggested. Perhaps he wanted a fresh start in a new location and had decided to leave what he knew behind to do so. The family and investigators don't think this likely, and neither do I. His behaviour does not match with the theory. He has not been seen since he disappeared, and he does not strike me as the type of person to leave a family he loved behind so easily. But people under stress are not always known to make rational decisions that make sense to their loved ones. So could Daniel have in fact left on his own accord? Well, it is very possible, but again, it's another question in this case that we may never really know an answer to. Now we come to the few questions in this case that really need to be answered. Number one is, when exactly did Daniel disappear? There is a 5-day period between the last known sighting of him and the house fire when his family realised he was missing. It is crucial to know when Daniel disappeared during this time. Had he actually been home on the Monday when Johnny visited, or had he been gone by that point? Number two is, was the fire at Daniel's home an accident, the result of electrical disturbance, or deliberate arson? You see, investigators could determine the location of the fire, but not its definitive cause. Could someone have harmed Daniel and returned to the property later to dispose of evidence? The most common theory suggests that the air conditioning unit had been left operational for so long that it caused a fire, but this is by no means certain. Number three, does Daniel's girlfriend have direct knowledge about his disappearance? Could she have been involved? Her story about Daniel's being on holiday seems to have no basis in reality, and she has repeatedly been obfuscated with investigators. Was she having an affair like the letter suggested? An affair that perhaps led to Daniel's disappearance somehow? Number 4. What happened to Daniel's dog? It reportedly never left his side, yet on the day of the fire it was nowhere to be found. Johnny had seen it on Monday afternoon, but not Daniel himself. How did it get out of the house, and could it have been by its owner's side when something heinous occurred? One of the biggest questions that I have personally is who wrote the letter informing Daniel about his girlfriend's affair. Whoever it was has never come forward to claim involvement, which is strange. I have also not seen reference to whether this letter has been forensically examined for fingerprints or other DNA traces. Whoever wrote the letter has never ever come forward and has never been identified. Finally, is Daniel alive or dead? Given what we know, it seems unlikely he is still alive, but in the absence of certain information about his fate, we cannot dismiss the possibility that he is alive. But if he is, where could he be? And if not, who was involved in his disappearance? To this day, Daniel Moses remains missing and has never been located.
Right now, we don't have any really overt signs that there was somebody that was out to get him. And it is unlikely that the perpetrator is a random individual traveling down the road. It's a small, remote area. Mainly it's relatives that live nearby and or friends. And you would not go to Daniel's house unless you were either lost or you were intended to go to his house. So that would kind of lead us to believe that whatever happened to him, it was somebody close to him.
His car is in the yard and his truck is in the yard. And that tells me one thing about my brother. He got in the car with someone he knew. Nobody came in his house and picked a fight with him and walked out that door. Daniel Moses had lethal hands. He was not to be played with, and he was a hunter. He had guns in his house. So a stranger didn't break in his house, because if they did, they would have left in a body bag. Whatever happened to Daniel on that land, my granddaddy's land, someone that knew him and knew him well took my brother. And they caught him off guard, and they murdered him in that house and took him out the back door. I believe it happened that late that Sunday night, because that Monday morning, my brother went to the house and knocked on the door, and Daniel didn't answer.
The most frustrating part of this whole investigation is the lack of real evidence or real investigative leads. There are individuals in Northampton County that know what happened to Daniel Moses. And if they can come forward, either directly or indirectly, obviously that will help us solve the case. I don't treat it as a cold case. The truth of the matter is that the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation does not use the term cold case because it conveys to the family that you're not interested in the case, you've moved on, you're doing something else. And in this case in particular, you see and you feel the pain that the family has when their missing brother they don't know where he is. And so you want to be as compassionate as you can with the family. So if I got an investigative lead that I can follow up on, I'm going to follow up on it.
My mother lived through the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement. You could bend her, but you couldn't break her. She died not knowing what happened to her child. I used to tell my mother, "Ma, I'm going to find Daniel." She would say, "Oh, child, I'll be dead and in my grave when y'all find Daniel." And I had just made up my mind that I wanted to come home one day and say, "Ma, we found Daniel. Daniel's dead, but we could take him to Chapel Hill Church and bury him with our ancestors now." And somebody out there felt that they had a right to deprive my mother of burying her child. You took my mother's child, her firstborn son. So I'm just hurt for my mother, She had a right to know what happened to her son. I hope that I'm not cold in my grave like my mother when they find out what happened to my brother. I keep looking because I hope I find him in my lifetime. The only thing we have left of Daniel is a jar where he put BBQ in and a sign on the side of the road that says "missing." I want justice for my mother, for my brother, for Daniel.
With that, this case remains open, but with many unanswered questions that still remain unanswered. Please rate this show and let me know what you guys think about this and the many other cases I've covered. You can follow me on all major social media platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Links are all down below in the description. If you have a case you'd like me to have a look at or cover, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm your host, and this has been the Unanswered Questions podcast. Until next time, next on Unanswered Questions. The infamous WWE plane ride from hell